All right, we are going to try a different video format to talk about our upcoming releases. So instead of doing the individual tasting notes, we're just going to kind of have a conversation about all the wines, the vintage. We've both been tasting these a lot over the past couple weeks, so we have a really good idea of kind of where they're at and really just give you as much info as possible so you can make your selections and take home the wines that kind of fit your palate the best. So upcoming is all the 2022 vintage wines out of the Verdot Estate and Quintessence Vineyard. We also have our 2024 Quintessence Sauvignon Blanc available. And then for some of you, our 2023 Optu White. Since we started introducing some white wines in the allocations a couple years ago. But want to focus on the reds. So 2022 vintage, kind of a weird growing season. So really late, wet, cold spring. We had some snow in April, which is scary to have a green growth and snow.
Very unusual.
Green growth and snow going on at the same time. It was pretty brief snow, didn't get too cold, didn't have any damage in the vineyard, but what it did is it kind of delayed the entire growing season. Seemed like overnight, mid-June, we were just 100 degrees every day, super hot, classic Red Mountain summer. And then we got around to late August, September 1st, when we'd usually be in the full swing of picking and fermenting, and we were kind of just sitting around cleaning tanks, sampling grapes, waiting for things to get ripe, not doing a whole lot. But then I think what the real story of this vintage is just the kind of miracle weather we had all of September and October. I think the best weather I can ever remember, fall weather.
Yeah. You can always kind of count on some great weather, especially September. It cools off and you'll get low 80s, in the 70s every day, and never rains. And we really had good fortune to see that from this vintage.
Yeah. It was like 85 degrees, 80 degrees, and sunny every day.
Yeah. So it really helped ripen things up nicely.
Yeah, so I think the character of these wines is just, they're really well balanced. I mean, that final ripening window was pretty ideal. Able to let things kind of hang on the vine, pick at a nice, easy pace. Lots of nice flavor development on all these.
Yeah.
Really complex, structured wines. Coming off the 21 vintage of these, which we released last year, it was a really warm year. A lot of those wines, I think, were pretty open and tasting really good right away. I think this vintage is kind of classic, where it strikes a balance of, like, we have the Merlots in front of us, the Malbecs. Those tend to be tasting pretty good right away, but definitely the Cabernets, the blends, the Petit Verdot. And this vintage are wines I think you can bring home if you want to pop them open earlier. Definitely give them a nice decant, but they should last a long time in your cellar.
Yeah, definitely great ageability from the vintage. And one of the other things I think, just talking about both vineyards, is that we started making wine from both these vineyards in the same vintage, and this is now the 11th vintage. We made Cabernet from Quintessence in 2012, and we made our first Cabernet off the estate in 2012 as well. So really kind of, especially what I see with the estate, just an overall general statement, is just the wines just seem, with the age of the vine, getting up there a little bit, they seem to be kind of coming into their own a little bit more mature vines, easier to kind of regulate the crop levels we want and make the wines that we really want from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been fun. I think one thing we noticed, the quality of these year by year as the vines mature, just getting better. more complex, across the board, all the different wines that we make. But I think, like you mentioned, just early on, they were both I think younger vineyard, big, fruit forward monsters.
Mm-hmm.
But as they've gotten older, they've kind of gone their own direction in the characteristics. I think the estate, not quite as big and tannic as Quintessence. It kind of has more of a polished, dusty tannin structure, really nice, rich palate, a little silkier.
Mm-hmm.
Quintessence, more rustic, probably the biggest, most tannic wines we make in our lineup.
Yeah. And that really has a lot to do with the site, that we have, elevations higher, but, more slope, a little rockier over on Quintessence for the most part.
Yeah, hardly any topsoil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, at the estate, we're just, right in the heart of Red Mountain. Not to confuse that with Heart of Hill Vineyard, but really we're kind of right in the center of the mountain, high enough that we don't have to deal with, super cold temperatures, but just, nice slope to our vineyard and nice soils. And yeah, you do kind of taste that little bit of dusty tannin in a good way.
Mm-hmm. So talking about the wines a little bit in order, not giving full tasting notes, but just what we think of them. So on the estate side, there's 7 different wines. Merlot, which is what we have on the table here. Honestly, tasting through these, I think one of the wines that's showing the best right away. I think a pretty awesome story to this wine. Obviously, your favorite varietal. You finally planting your estate, planting Merlot, kind of building this, favorite varietal from the ground up with the help of Dick Boucher. And I think in the past couple of vintages, this Merlot has really taken a leap forward in quality.
Yeah, I think so. Now, this was our second phase of planting. We planted in 2015, so we waited a little bit to sort of release the first even varietals from the estate that we really thought they were where we wanted them to be. And it's kind of really coming into its own, and we've been really aggressive, just managing crop levels from, when we get from bud break and, doing shoot thinning early on and really trying to get a consistent crop. And that really starting to show with Merlot especially, I think.
Mm-hmm. Merlot's delicious. Malbec out of the estate. Interesting to compare it to the Quintessence. Quintessence Malbec, very concentrated, very fruit forward. Estate Malbec, a little more of a true Malbec. You kind of have that violet floral aromas, a little bit of wet gravel earthiness that you can have with some Malbec.
It's really interesting to see the differences. We're all Red Mountain, but the differences in the sites, and we're really not more than maybe a half a mile apart, but that just shows you the differences you can see in Red Mountain, just having to do with elevation and aspect in soils will make all the difference.
Mm-hmm. Estate blend, kind of a showcase of the newer planting at the estate. So mostly Cabernet, quite a bit of Petit Verdot at 25%, a little bit of Merlot and Cab Franc. Has quite a bit of tannin in that blend, I think, from that Petit Verdot and all that Cab. I remember tasting that really nice full mouthfeel too that kind of hits all different parts of your palate. Probably a wine that's going to age quite a while. Really nice food pairing wine.
Yeah, and so we're able to do this because we really have some different clones that we can use. We're going to talk a little bit about the different clonal Cabernets that we have and the Estate Cabernet a little bit later. But we do have 6 blocks of Cabernet, and so it gives us the ability to use Cabernet in a blend like this as well, and not have them all kind of taste the different. They taste different because the clones are different.
Before we get into the cabs, last other estate wine is the Petit Verdot. If you love Petit Verdot, you'll love this wine. Really big, full, chewy tannins, kind of that like violet, blueberry aroma that Petit Verdot can have.
Really, really kind of a fun, different wine, and difficult to make because they can really get away from you and become too tannic, and with that you really can't bottle them separate. They just become a blending grape. But we've been able to sort of tame them, I think, and really be able to. We make one from here. We make one from Ciel de Cheval in some vintages, and it's not easy to do, but.
And then talking about the 3 estate cabs. So first off, we'll talk about the fermentation techniques that we use. That's called out on the technical info. If I can figure it out how to edit these videos, I'll try and put a picture of all these. No promises. So the oak fermentation we use, that's in that initial 7 to 10 days, typically, where we're going through primary fermentation. For a lot of these estate and quintessence wines, we like to ferment an oak. It's something we've been doing over a decade now. We have these big, or they're not really that big, oak tank fermenters, which kind of look like your classic wine fermenting tank, except they're made out of oak. They hold about 2 tons. We also use roller barrels, which are 500 liters. They're these big, double the size of a typical barrel. They lay on their side. Typically in a fermentation, the cap gets separated from the juice. The cap is where all the grape skins are. That's where all the color, a lot of the flavor comes from. So in a closed fermentation, like a roller barrel, we've kind of noticed that cap has nowhere to go, and it's just kind of constantly suspended in the juice. So it really helps us get lots of extraction and flavor, which I really think you're able to get a really concentrated wine, but you don't necessarily get that like chalky tannin that you always have to be careful of when you're making wines on Red Mountain. And then once we're done using the roller barrels, we'll pop out one of the heads and then we'll set them on their sides, and then we'll ferment in what we call upright barrels. So same size, we typically only get about a barrel of finished wine from those, so 25 cases. So a lot of these wines are going through multiple different tiny lot fermentations. So it really is a labor of love, intense conditions during the middle of harvest, managing all these different fermentations, but just adds tons of different texture and flavor to these wines that we're really proud of.
Yeah, there's really something to be said for. It's hard to describe, but when you have grapes in direct contact with toasted wood inside a fermenter, we get this great flavor right initially, and that stays with the wine, kind of softens it. Like Will mentioned, you don't get the sort of chalkiness, and we really like it, and really try to use it as much as possible, whether it's an upright tank or a roller barrel or a punch down tank. So, and then sometimes we really have to look at the clone and the grape we're using as to the type of vessel we're fermenting in, because it can make a difference.
Mm-hmm. So 3 estate cabs, 1 estate Cabernet. That's the first wine we made out of the estate since 2012 vintage. Comes from the original 2008 planting, same blocks and clones that we've used every year. And then we have a couple newer additions, an estate Cabernet Clone 169 and Clone 412. The estate cab, for me, kind of exhibits that classic character of the estate vineyard, really rich and concentrated, kind of like a silky tannin structure to it. And then the reason why we chose the 2 clonal cabs, planted the same year, probably within days of each other, really like 10 yards away from each other from where they're situated at our vineyard, but they couldn't be more different. 412, very new world, bright red fruit, still has lots of like rich concentration, but not as much tannin. I mean, it's still Red Mountain Cab, still has lots of tannin. And then Clone 169, really dark fruit, not as fruit forward, more old world style, really like firm structure to it. Lots of like chewy, dusty tannin, really big wine.
Yeah, and I think if you've tasted these wines before, everybody always has a favorite between those two, and I always tell people nobody's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, depending on your own palate, you might care for the 412 more than 169. They're very different wines from each other. The 169 is kind of on the southern side of our estate, so a little bit more slope, and it tends to ripen a little quicker than the 412. And then going back to the original block that Will mentioned, that's Clone 2 and 6, and that's the wine that we've made now for, this is the 11th vintage, so really coming into its own. And we really like that combination of those two clones together.
Mm-hmm. Then going into Quintessence Vineyard, so property that we've sourced fruit from since 2012, made our first Quintessence Cab, 2012 vintage, planted and managed by Marshall Edwards, who really experienced, amazing vineyard manager. I think once we caught wind of this planting going in, knowing the site, knowing the guy who's going to be managing the fruit, it was a no-brainer that we wanted to be there.
I got to actually go out after it was planted, and Marshall was going to kind of announce to the world that he was going to put these, he has, fruit for sale. I cornered him and went out and actually got to pick the rows we wanted.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing.
From, before anybody else got fruit off of there. So, and that was the first phase of their planting. So feel real fortunate to be able to get the fruit that we wanted. It's almost like it's our own vineyard, but it's not. Mm-hmm. Marshall does a great job of managing it, and it's owned by a couple of guys.
So Quintessence, like we mentioned earlier, really extreme growing conditions, super warm. It's more on the kind of southeastern side of the mountain, where you get some southern slopes, some eastern facing slopes. During the peak of the growing season, you get all the warm, intense morning sun, which on Red Mountain, by 8 a.m. it can get to like the mid-90s on some days. Really rocky soils, not much topsoil. Just makes, I think, for wines that are really expressive, really concentrated, fun wines to drink, fun wines to make, but kind of like the way we try and make them, they can be beasts with the current growing conditions that they come from. But I think we're really able to tame them and make wines across the board that are, I think, really approachable and delicious at the same time.
Yeah, and the Merlot is kind of an indicator for us as to how we're coming along in the vintage, because it'll always be the first block that we pick, the Quintessence Merlot, and these are bigger wines. They're different than the estate, but we wouldn't want everything to taste the same anyway. No. So it's kind of fun and unique that they are different. And I think it's we had people do the preview tasting already and really compare those two Merlots, and they're both really beautiful, really showing well, both of them, but different styles, based on where they're from, from the vineyard itself.
Yeah, Malbec is the same, like we mentioned, really fruit-forward style Malbec, really concentrated, fun wine. Kind of a fan favorite at the preview tastings every year because it shows so well right away. The red blend we make out of this vineyard is kind of like a Bordeaux blend, but flipped on its head. So it's mostly Petit, Verdot, and Cabernet Franc. Definitely a bigger style blend with those blending varietals kind of being the bulk of it. That blend we're trying to push in the style of Quintessence Vineyard. Those wines tend to be a little bit bigger, so we want to make a blend that's definitely unique to that growing site. And then last up in the lineup is the Quintessence Cab, which is always one of my favorites. Always from blocks 7 and 9, those original, plantings that you went out and chose the rose for. Our winemaker Mitch has said to me multiple times, like those are probably some of the best Cabernet blocks in the state of Washington.
Definitely.
Right in the middle of the southern facing slope, pretty extreme, but just makes for a wine that's really concentrated, really well balanced, super complex, has all sorts of mix of like primary fruit, New World flavors, Old World spice, minerality, and just, I think, one of the best wines that we make every year.
Yeah, definitely. And those are clones, 169 and 191. Same clone we use on our own estate. And it just works really well. Kind of a little early ripening Cabernet clone. And really works well. Really polished, beautiful wine.
Mm-hmm. And then last up, touching on the white wines. So Optu White is our classic Bordeaux Blanc style blend, Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon. Some older vine fruit that we work with at Arts and Clipson Vineyard. Tasting really amazing. Really good summer wine or fall wine if you're getting this wine later in the year. Goes well with all sorts of different cuisines, seafood dishes. And then our Quintessence Sauv Blanc, which is our single vineyard Sauv Blanc that we make. We make it in a couple egg-shaped oak fermenters. So it gets more contact between the lees at the bottom of the fermenter and the juice. So it really makes for like a richer, more full style Sauvignon Blanc that's pretty ripe, but pretty well balanced with nice fresh acidity. And definitely something that tends to sell out by the end of the year after we pour it at these upcoming preview tastings.
Right. We really want our white wines to accentuate the fruit that we're working with. And we do barrel ferment, but we're really conscious of not having things too oaky and, really we want that great flavor from the barrel, but at the same time we want the fruit to sort of shine, and that's what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of across the board too. You'll see in the technical notes for all these reds, lots of new oak that we use for aging, but you don't really notice it that much when you taste these wines. Really well integrated.
Yeah, definitely.
We're shooting
definitely
for.
well integrated.
But yeah, thanks for listening. If you've made it this far, I'm super proud of all these wines. Thanks again for being a member, and hope you enjoy them. Cheers.
Cheers.